yesterday. Yeah, you said something in the last video, and it was like I had a little bit of a pause before I could reply to you because when anyone says that line to me, it's heartbreaking. Just a
Uh-oh.
tiny little bit heart.
Uh-oh.
And
Which line was this, Dean?
it was, you said, I don't think I'm creative.
Oh,
And that's terrible to think. But it rolls into today's topic because there is a difference between creativity and creative thinking.
yes.
And most of when people say I'm not creative, they're usually thinking about creativity
Yeah, I
and
think
not
they're,
about creative thinking.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think they're usually thinking about, I'm not like a creative designer or
Right. They
good
think
at
there's something
drawing
like
or
it's the
art or,
muse, right?
yeah, but there's
And
lots of avenues of creativity. And
right.
I know
Creation of beauty, something like that.
at one point I felt like this, and that's why I had to bring up the question,
Right.
because I'm sure you probably at some point in your life have thought the same thing.
No.
Okay, good. Well,
There's lots of other things wrong with me, but that's one thing out of a million doesn't happen to be it. Okay. So the difference between creativity and creative thinking is that you can control and exercise and become very fast and proficient at creative thinking. Whereas creativity is it's a confluence of internal and external factors, time, stuff that's gone into your brain ahead of time, anything that sort of shifts your perspective or paradigm on something or a reframing, you can't control it,
mhm.
basically, right? It's fabulous. It's the difference between getting and developing answers and alternatives and getting an insight. The insight is creativity. The alternatives and the answers and the options and the things that open up our world and let us progress our, everything we work on, our whole society, culture, everything, that's creative thinking. The insight is creativity that cannot be controlled. So almost all the books, in fact, I would argue every book or exercise or course about creativity is really talking about creative thinking. And
Mhm.
everybody can do more creative thinking. All of us already are creative and have insights. It's just because you can't control it. And especially if you're not capturing it in those, like that little thing I showed yesterday for how to quickly capture all these thoughts and ideas as they occur to you, you could easily go years and think that you've had no creative insights at all. And it turns out you had loads, but you didn't like record them fast enough and they sort of went away and now they're gone.
I think it just, I probably shouldn't have said that the way that I said it. I think it just,
It's a very common thing for people to say.
well, I think for me, it was like I had to really look at the areas that I was creative in. Like I
Right.
had to be very introspective in where I was, where my highest level of creativity lied.
Yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
But yeah, a lot of people sort of just make the assumption, oh, I'm not creative, or I'm more logical, or ideas aren't as important
Yes.
as execution, and all of these other things that people say to make themselves feel better if they don't think that they're having lots of ideas. And they are, they're just not capturing them. I promise
Mhm.
everybody,
Mhm.
whoever watches this video, is having some sort of insight, throughout the day and every day, but they're not capturing it. So it's just gone. And we have no
Yeah.
memory of it, right? I mentioned before, hey, there's Dr. V. I
Yeah.
mentioned before, I think it was in the video, but I may not have, that twice a week I go and I look at this sort of document that gets built, this log file of thoughts and ideas that gets automatically built by my phone. And every single 2 to 3 days, and you'd think I'm used to it by now, but I'm not. Every time I go in, every few days and look at it, I see something and I say, wow, that's really good. I can't believe I don't remember thinking that, but I
Mm.
clearly did because I recorded it, but it's gone. The
Right.
stuff it's gone so fast from your head. You can easily go a very long time and think that you don't have creative insights. You're having them all the time. You just don't have a net that catches them. Simple as that. How about you, Dr. V?
You got to hook them as quickly as possible. Because
Yeah.
I do find that ideas. I have some amazing shower ideas. I mean, almost everybody does. And if I had a whiteboard in the shower where I could write stuff
Yeah.
down, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. I
There's a
always get
sharper
mine.
image product in there somewhere.
Or a recording, or an instant recording, like
Yeah.
if there was
Mm.
something similar to Alexa, hey, Betty, jot down this idea for me.
Yeah,
Yeah. No.
I was gonna say it always surprises me where people get their best ideas, walking,
Walking, definitely.
driving. Me, it's usually when I'm outdoors doing something,
You're right. When your
camping or
hands are occupied or enough of
yeah.
your brain is occupied to
Yeah.
keep you alive, so that,
Yep.
but in something routine, and then the rest of your mind is sort of like playing in the backyard, messing around, nobody's paying attention to it or supervising it, and then bang, something comes out.
Right.
So if you guys going back to creative thinking
Mhm.
and how every book, and there are a lot, whenever we talk about creative or creativity tools, we're really talking about creative thinking tools, not creativity tools. There's no such
Okay.
thing as a creativity tool, except maybe magic mushrooms.
Or a brain.
Beyond that,
Beyond
that's
that.
about it, right? So have you guys ever heard of a book called A Whack on the Side of the Head?
No.
Yes.
So that book,
I even have a creative whack pack. That's
there you
essentially
Sometimes
go.
I
And
think I
I
could
have,
use one of those.
and he's
the
got, and
creative whack pack.
he
Yeah.
also makes a tool, like a ball kind of toy, not a tool, but a toy kind of thing. And it's because it's spherical, he called it a ball of wax, WHACKS.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great. It's great branding. Anyway, of all the stuff that's in there, I really only took away, and I've had that book since I was a very young teenager, and I
Hmm.
go back to it every so often.
Supposed
Uh,
to very old
there are
school.
only two things that really sort of came away and stuck. And he built a tool in there that I've since replicated in Google Sheets, the spreadsheet service from Google. It sounded easier to use that way. And what it is, it's just a list of random numbers between 1 and 400, and you just pick a number. I mean, there's no pattern to them, so you can just like put your finger on a number, and that's your number, or wherever your eye falls. And then you turn the page, and there's sort of like a table, and you go, okay, this is from 1 to 10 and 10 to 400. And if you picked 280, like you meet somewhere around here on the
Hmm.
table, and there's a word there, one word. Generally, it's a noun, and it's an evocative, visual kind of noun. It's army. It's match. It's almost always words that have multiple connotations,
Hmm.
right?
Net.
So army can mean the army. Army can mean army ants. Army can mean all kinds of stuff. Army can mean you have an arm. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
And what you do is you take that one word. You have a question. You go in with a question like, "How am I going to do X?" Or what's another way to think about something? And then you just there's no way for you to pick the word ahead of time, so any sort of mental bias doesn't come in. It's just you picked a random number, and the numbers don't mean anything, and then you get the word associated with the number. And from there, you can just grab a pencil and paper or just take a walk or whatever and start thinking about all the various connotations of how army would apply or match or whatever would apply to your question. And that to me is one of the, it's an exercise that once you do it often enough, you don't need the tool anymore.
Hmm.
You can literally just pick anything in your environment. Black cat walking down the street as you're walking your dog, done. Squirrel, done. Red car, done. The letter R in someone's license plate, done. Let's go. Right? You don't need the tool anymore. But to get started, it's a great, great tool, and completely worth I just checked today, worth the less than $5 it takes to buy a whack on the side of the head in Kindle.
And Dr. V has cards for that.
I have the card. Actually, I have
Yeah.
there's a thing called the creative whack pack, and it's
Yeah.
way up top behind the screen on my bookshelf. And you've encouraged me now to take it out again because they're an additional set of cards. But then
Yeah.
I have the gamification cards, which is a similar thing because they're really conversation starters and a way of initiating a new train of
Right.
cause and effect within your little neurons.
Yep. I thought that the
Mm.
whack pack was less useful as an individual, but very
Mm.
good if you're sort of brainstorming with another person.
Right.
Mhm.
Really good. And then you can even like spread out the cards, and each person has to come at the same problem from a different perspective. Right? These are all creative thinking tools. They're, like I said, there is no such thing as a creativity tool,
Mhm.
but very helpful for that. And then the other concept that I took away from that book that served me the best was that everything, literally everything that we do and say and believe is based on assumptions. And the assumptions may have been true at one point, but they're not necessarily true anymore. And
Mhm.
it's always worthwhile to take your time and try to figure out what are all of the assumptions. If X is true, why do we think X is true? And just try to list as many assumptions as you can. And what you'll find is, and this goes back to, like, for instance, the question we talked about yesterday, why do people register and attend webinars, like live webinars. Like, why do they show up, really?
Mhm.
Right? And it turns out like no one was asking the question, but there are 4 for sure reasons people show up. And if you don't ask these really simple fundamental questions that everyone has stopped asking or has never thought to ask, you'll never get into the assumptions. And if even 1 or 2 of the assumptions is broken or no longer true, there's an opportunity for you to make something substantially different that still leverages all of the other assumptions that are true into a new product, a new line of business, whatever you want to do.
Mhm.
Very helpful. And again, almost no one challenges or even thinks about what or lists what are the assumptions that make a statement
But
true.
aren't your assumptions also kind of the metaphor that you have? Like if you have the assumption that life is good, everything that you extrapolate from that is going to be more optimistic than pessimistic. Or you're just saying about the assuming what their motivations are for being there.
Or what we all accept as true, which may
Okay.
not be true anymore.
Yeah.
Like, anything big that changes in society or from like a big change in, what the government's trying to do is usually someone has decided or figured out, one or the other, that some assumption is no longer true. Like for a long time, you couldn't drive faster than 55 miles an hour.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that was based on certain assumptions and the safety of capabilities of cars at the time. And I think the
The road
government
road
wanted
design
to cut
too.
down
Yeah.
on energy consumption and gas consumption, right? And all these stuff. And then gas became cheaper, lanes became wider, highways became much safer, with like the steel cable and the rumble strips and all kinds of stuff, and divided highways. Cars became much safer, and 55 just didn't make sense anymore. But it took a long time to transition the whole country from 55 to 60, 65,
And
70.
I remember during that time the fuel efficiency thing, because we had the Arab oil embargo of
Yes.
73.
Yep.
And that just like, oh, we got to conserve fuel because it's just
Right.
way too
Right.
expensive now.
So any big change you see like that, which takes years at the government level to roll out, it's
Yeah.
because some set of assumptions or one or more assumptions are no longer true. And I promise you, there would have been people that are arguing, left, right, and sideways. That I don't think that phrase makes any sense actually, but
That's okay.
arguing passionately that 55 is the right speed and we shouldn't change it. Ignoring the fact that at one point 55 was not the speed, and we did change it to 55. And
Well,
assumptions aren't true.
lower speeds are indeed safer despite
Sure.
the progress in car design. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't go 55 through a school zone.
And they still
No.
improve our mileage.
True. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's
But on the
these
highways,
Yeah.
you don't need it. Everything else around it changed, so that 55 was kind of the last thing to change.
Well,
Yeah.
even assumptions that people say that, we always have to have oil, we always have to get gasoline, and yet you see electric cars
Right.
becoming more and more popular, such that,
Absolutely.
even GM is going to do nothing but produce electric cars by 2035.
Right. Although I saw earlier this week, we're already making assumptions about oil, fuel efficiency, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
fuel usage and electric cars. Countries that have the highest penetration, like Norway and parts of the US, like Phoenix and Southern California, that have the highest number of electric cars and highest percentage, their use of oil hasn't budged. It's as high as it ever was.
Mhm.
Although it's worth noting, right? And like this is the other thing. People say, "Oh, electric cars, they're going to make a big difference on how much oil we pump and use in the world." Only one out of every, and oil obviously is not actually in barrels, right? Oil's never in barrels. It's just an old-fashioned kind of measurement that we use. But for every 3 barrels of oil that are pulled out of the ground, only one of them is used for all types of oil-based fuel, from
Right.
jet fuel down to kerosene and lamp oil. Only one of those barrels covers all of that energy usage. And the other 2 barrels are used for, everything, right? Pharmaceuticals, fertilizer, plastics,
Plastic, big time. Yeah.
chemicals. So
Grease.
even if we
Yeah.
really even if no car or ship or truck or plane or lamp ever burned another milliliter of oil, we would still need 2/3 of everything we're pumping
Yeah.
for everything else that we use. So yeah, creative thinking, the 2 things I took from A Whack on the Side of the Head. There's another book called Thinker Toys, which is not bad, but not quite as good. And of course, the sort of granddaddy of all these books is a book called from Edward de Bono, an English guy, called Lateral Thinking. And that's a book where it's a very small, little thin little book. It's absolutely worth spending an hour and a half reading Lateral Thinking. You'll never think the same way again, right? I promise.
Lateral thinking. Okay.
Yeah, De Bono, it turns out, I just checked on Google today because I thought he died last year. He died almost exactly a year ago. He was 88 years old.
Well,
But he came up with a lot of these concepts that everyone else has built on since. So if you want to go back to sort of the source material, then De Bono is the guy to do it.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, for a whack on the side of the head, it's worth buying for $5 just for the random word exercise. You can find random word simulators and stuff or tools on the internet that are free, but I've tried a bunch of them. They've never been very good. They sort of miss the point.
But
It's
you won't
not
find,
just pick a random word from a dictionary. It has to be like a very evocative word with a lot of different homonyms, right?
Mm.
Like there's a lot of different ways for you to visualize or think about the exact same word in very different contexts. So that, and then always going that the opposite is also very often true.
be a contrarian.
Yeah, the opposite is very often true. Like if you come after it from, I had to use that lesson last year. I went to our local credit union and my daughter had money in a bank account and I needed to pull it out and get it. But I wasn't on the account, but I had a check from her.
Mhm.
And the check turns out was about $10 or $11 and change short of what would have covered it and still allowed the $5 minimum that they require in there, right? And so I said, well, how much is she short by? So the check doesn't bounce. And they told me the amount. I mean, it's a credit union. I've been there. I go there like every 2 weeks for,
Yeah, so they know who you are.
So I gave them $12 and I said, here, put this into this account because anybody can put money into anyone else's account. I'm not
Yes.
sure you know this, right?
Yep.
And once I put the money in, there was enough money and I pulled $1,000 out.
I will tell you, I've tried to deposit money at Chase into my wife's account and they wouldn't let me do it. But you could
Some
do it at
places
the
they do.
ATM. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I think they're afraid of fraud or people being set up and things
Yeah.
like that.
But most places will allow you to do that. It's
Yeah,
true.
most places, yeah.
And I don't know how it works at Chase, but at the credit union, they have my picture and that's how I identify myself. So like they're visually confirming who I am.
Yep.
Instead of just relying on an ID that I could have faked or something. But yeah, I just put a little bit of money in, took a whole bunch of money out.
Awesome.
You don't normally think about putting money into someone's account in order to get money out of it, but you know,
Hey, do
It's
what you
great.
do.
contrarian view works.
It's great, great ROI. $12 to
Oh
get
yeah,
1,000.
totally worth it. All right, so that's about it. I highly recommend that you go check out A Whack on the Side of the Head by Roger Van Oak. I think his name is OECH. Anyway, you just go to in Amazon. You just start typing "whack side head." That's enough. It'll find you the right book.
You're there.
And it was updated, I think, about 10, 12 years ago to a new edition. So it might even be better.
And the whack on the side of the head is different than John's face palm.
Yes.
Yeah, John's face palm is a whole other thing.
I did that well done.
All right.
All right.
Mostly for bad jokes.
All right, that's it for me. A Whack on the Side of the Head, Edward de Bono, Lateral Thinking, Thinker Toys, if you're looking for a third book to look into this. But the main point is you are creative and you're having creative insights all the time. You're just not recording them. And oh, by the way, John, I went ahead and published the shortcut and the drafts little action for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
I put that on a little thing I can show you later. Or anyone else is interested, send an email to dean@waycreative.com. I'll give it to you.
Fantastic.
And that's how I do all my capture. And it's rock solid, it's dependable, and it's ultra fast. As fast as you can type it or say it, you've captured it.
Perfect.
So totally worth it. All right, guys, anything else?
Not that I can think of.
Really
No, this has been great though. Thank you.
All right.
More for your
Nice to see you again,
entertainment.
Dr. V.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad my Zoom ended early.
Yeah.